The Russian Empire, Tsars, world power, and the rise to the largest country on Earth. For centuries, the fate of Europe has been inextricably linked to the history of Russia. The nuclear power is by far the largest country in the world in terms of area and has a history of more than 1,000 captivating years full of wars, powerful rulers, and unprecedented expansion. Join us on a journey through time. Let's get into the exciting history of the former Tsarist Empire, and let's be curious about amazing facts about one of the greatest empires of all time. Kievan Rus, the emergence of Russian identity. To get an understanding about the origins of the Russian Empire and its fascinating culture, we need to get back to the 9th century AD. At that time, Norman warriors established the so-called Kievan Rus. This was a loose union of Slavic principalities. The medieval ruling federation stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea and founded the Rurikid dynasty, which was to determine Russia's fate for an incredible time span of 750 years until 1598. An important part of Russian identity was born in 988, when the Kiev Grand Prince Vladimir the Saint embraced Christianity, married the sister of the Eastern Roman Emperor in Byzantium, and prepared the blossoming of Slavic Orthodox culture in the 11th century. It is this culture that, over the next centuries, sets Russia apart from the Reformation, Renaissance, and other central developments of Western Europe. Even today, Vladimir the Saint enjoys great prestige in Russia as the founder of the United Russian Nation. The prime of Kievan Rus was destroyed with the invasion of the Mongols from 1223 under Genghis Khan, who mercilessly seized the Slavic dominion and carved it up into several small principalities. Murder and endless power. The greatest rulers of the Russian Empire. At this point, Russia was still far from being a Tsarist empire. It was only in the course of the 14th century that the Mongols were repelled, when the Grand Duchy of Moscow gained a dominant role among the many small principalities of Kievan Rus and subjugated the latter. An outstanding personality was Grand Duke Ivan III the Great, who ruled from 1462 to 1505, built the famous Moscow Kremlin, and created a unified Russian Empire. The country became a Tsarist empire in 1547, when the notorious Grand Prince Ivan IV, the Terrible, had himself crowned Tsar at the age of 16 and pushed ahead with a massive expansion of the empire until his death in 1584. The fact that Ivan, a passionate chess player, became a ruler of terror through mass executions and brutal methods of torture, such as boiling living people, is not something we want to discuss in detail here. However, Ivan's son Fyodor died in 1598 without a successor and ended the 700-year era of the Rurikids. Even younger than Ivan the Terrible, at the tender age of only 10, Peter I ascended the throne in 1684 and earned his nickname the Great through unprecedented rearmament, modernization, and an opening up on the Tsarist Empire to the west. Another great was Catherine II. In 1762, she became the only female Tsarina during the long history of the Russian Empire. Fun fact: Catherine is the only female ruler in history with the reorganized epithet the Great, notorious for her uninhibited sex life and the fact that her husband was murdered a few days after she came to power. The Empress, who was popular with the Russians, ruled for a whopping 34 years and established the Tsarist Empire as a major European power. The last truly great Tsar was certainly Alexander II, who became the so-called Tsar Liberator with the abolition of serfdom in 1861. He led the huge empire into the modern age through massive reforms. An unimaginable area. Why is Russia so huge? Germany is around 358,000 square kilometers in size, while the area of today's Russia is an incredible 17 million square kilometers, 47 times the size of the Federal Republic of Germany. But that's not all. The Russian Empire reached its greatest expansion in 1895 with almost 23 million square kilometers. How could the Russians conquer such astronomical land areas? The answer is hidden in centuries of expansion, step by step. After the Kievan Rus covered a whopping 2.5 million square kilometers as early as 1505, the Tsarist Empire took Siberia all the way to the Pacific in the 17th century. But why did the vast expansion in Asia occur? Historians cite security and strategic considerations as the main reasons. The Russian is not only European, but also Asian, declared the prominent writer Dostoevsky, citing that Asia could be Russia's way out of probable future European destinies. From the defeat in 1855 in the Crimean War against the Ottomans, the situation was aggravated by the fact that Russia was forbidden to expand further towards Europe, and Asia marked the last option for land reclamation. Huge growth and military success. The duel with the Ottoman Empire. As we talk about Ottomans, we claim to understand the expansion of the Tsarist Empire. A look at the Russo-Turkish Wars is indispensable. Between 1568 and the First World War, the Russian and Ottoman empires engaged in a multitude of military conflicts with religion and geopolitical intentions. Because Russia sees itself as the Christian Orthodox successor to the Byzantine Empire, which was conquered by the Ottomans in 1453. The Russians also dreamed of reconquering Constantinople and intended to protect the Orthodox Christian inhabitants of the Ottoman Empire, who experienced extreme discrimination there. Over the course of 4 centuries, the two great empires fought more than 10 wars against each other, from which Russia emerged as the triumphant victor from the 17th century onwards, winning brutal battles over the Black Sea coast, the Caucasus, and the Balkans. On land and sea, the Ottoman Empire was weakened further and further by Russian victories. It faded away to become the sick man of the Bosporus and found an end after the First World War. Close friends and great enemies. Russia's relations with Europe. While the Ottoman Empire became Russia's notorious enemy, relations with the other European countries had proven to be changeable. Germany, for example, while Peter the Great initiated flourishing trade relations with the Holy Roman Empire at the beginning of the 18th century, promoted strategic marriages between Germans and Russians, and even gave his new capital, St. Petersburg, a German name, relations cooled considerably down towards the end of the 19th century when the German Empire, in preparation for the First World War, joined forces with Austria-Hungary, Italy, and the Ottoman Empire against the Russians and its allies, the powers of Great Britain and France. Just 50 years earlier, the situation looked very different. In the Crimean War, the largest military conflict in Europe between Napoleon and the First World War, France and the United Kingdom fought alongside the Ottomans against Russia and brought the Tsarist empires to its knees. Russia's relations with Poland have also been tense since the partitions of Poland and the suppression of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth from 1772 to 1795 by the Tsarist Empire and its allies, a situation that was once again massively aggravated by Soviet dominance in the 20th century. The same applied to Scandinavia, especially Sweden, which was defeated by Russia in the Great Northern War from 1700 to 1721. Despite friendly attempts and many partial successes, Russia's relationship with Western Europe has remained mixed to this day, and many historians have wondered to what extent the huge state formed a political part of the European community. Eastern allies. First intersections with China. Surprising but true, Russia's relations with China have also been characterized by ups and downs for over 400 years. In the 17th century, when the Tsarist Empire expanded into Northeast Asia and came in touch with the territories of the Chinese Qing dynasty, the great powers peacefully agreed on a border and started a brisk trade that continued to this day. These are the first bilateral agreements that a Chinese emperor has entered into with a Western country. But during the course of the 19th and 20th centuries, despite the friendship between the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, there were repeated tensions and occasionally even military conflicts which brought about a rapprochement between China and the USA from 1972 onwards. Although today, the impression of a close friendship between Russia and China arises. The corporation primarily serves economic purposes and, as in the days of the Russian Empire, is overshadowed by political and ideological conflicts of interest. Problematic for centuries. The Russian economy. Let's talk about the economy. Whoever talks about the Russian Empire can barely avoid the term autocratic modernization. This refers to the era of Peter the Great, who wanted to turn the Tsarist Empire into a more progressive state from above in the shortest possible time. The visionary promoted trade by setting up manufactories, brought foreign specialists into the country, sent Russians to study in other European countries, and even had the Byzantine calendar for time replaced by the Julian calendar. The problem: during the modernization, large parts of the population, above all, the tradition-conscious farmers, were left behind and continued to live in poverty. This contrast between progressive government and common people, between modern cities and backward country, is still a huge challenge for the Russian economy today and explains why the country's prosperity lags behind Western states. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the phenomenon was particularly evident under Boris Yeltsin's government. Even though Yeltsin established free market principles, a free press and democratic structures, the population suffered from massive poverty, just like 300 years earlier under Peter the Great. Soviets, socialism, and reorganization. Russia during the 20th century. Amid the horrors of World War I, the Russian Empire slided into what was arguably the most fateful year in its history, 1917. Triggered by starvation among the war-tortured population, Tsar Nicholas II was overthrown in the February Revolution, followed by the Bolsheviks taking power under their party leader Lenin in the frame of the October Revolution. Violent years of oppression followed until 1922, when the Soviet Union, the USSR, became the world's first socialist state. The Russian Empire no longer existed. After Lenin's death, Joseph Stalin, one of the most cruel dictators in human history, took over the Soviet Union in 1924. Millions of people became victims to his political purges and got deported to the notorious Gulag prison camps. Under Stalin, Russia was growing into a world power, fought an unprecedented nuclear arms race with the United States during the Cold War, and inspired dozens of countries around the world to socialist models of society. In the mid-1980s, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Mikhail Gorbachev, marked a turning point. Under the slogan Glasnost, transparency, and perestroika, restructuring, he was striving for reforms that ultimately brought about the collapse of the run-down world power. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union officially broke apart. What remained was a country that, under Boris Yeltsin's reformed from 1992 to 1999, sought to join the global market economy through liberalization and privatization. What follows is the current Russian era of the 21st century, largely shaped by one man, Vladimir Putin. Which powerful ruler from Russian history would you like to meet in person? Were you particularly shocked by certain facts about the Tsarist Empire? Share your thoughts in the comments and help our channel grow. By subscribing, you'll continue to discover exciting videos about humanity's most fascinating eras.